Hey, hello everybody. I am Steven. We are so glad that you are tuning in. I'm going to be looking back and forth, up and down because I want to see all the comments. But we're going to give everyone just a minute to hop in here. I know that we have some people that are going to be watching with us live and some people that are going to be watching with us later. Either way, we are so glad that you are making some time because I think this is a really important topic. And I'm hoping that this short amount of time that we have together will be really helpful for you and your loved ones. Some of you may be watching because this particular topic on fear and anxiety and mental health is something that you're battling and walking through right now. For others, it may be that you have a loved one and you're watching on their behalf and you just want to help them. Either way, I am so glad that you are tuning in. As you're coming in, if you would like to say hello in the chat thread, feel free to. Just let us know who you are, where you're watching from. Myself or one of our team will be there to interact with you, just depending on where we're at in the webinar. But obviously, this is a big topic. This is already a big topic, regardless of all the things that are happening in the world. Every single year, this is one of the top topics that are requested for us at our church. But in addition to that, we are in a global pandemic. We are in an election year. We're in an economic kind of a recession where some would say we're kind of on the uptick again. But then we're right on the edge of October, which, for more playful reasons, it's the season of fear and horror and scary stuff. I personally love scary movies. Do you guys like scary movies? Any other scary movie fans out there? I know most of my friends don't. Most of my friends think it's ridiculous. My wife thinks it's a complete waste of time. The one we can agree on is Alfred Hitchcock, so she'll still watch kind of the classics with me because those are totally different vibe. But my wife thinks they're ridiculous. Some of you do. Some of you love them like me. What I love is the thrill, the artificial thrill that comes when you're watching a scary movie. And the difference between a scary movie and the fear that you have then in real life is when a scary movie ends and the credits roll, the fear ends because it's not real, right? But in real life, the fears don't just go away, and we know that. So our goal in this is twofold. And if you're taking notes, I think that's actually a really good idea because I'm going to try to cover a bunch of stuff all at the same time, and that way it'll help you to remember it, and maybe you'll even write down things I don't say because it triggers another thought in your mind. The two goals are this: to help you identify the source of your fears, your anxieties, and your mental illnesses, and then two, to offer you like a next step in helping you to find healing and recovery for those. I'm not at all promising that in this time together that we are going to resolve your fears and anxieties, but maybe we can give you something, one or two things that can help you to get through it for the next week, the next month. So let me share who I am. My name is Steven. I am a doctor, but not in psychology or medical practice. I'm receiving my doctorate in leadership development, and this particular subject on fear and anxiety and insecurity has come up over and over and over in my time as a pastor. I am a pastor of a church, a Grace Church that some of you watching attend, some of you watching are familiar with, and some of you have no idea what it is. You just saw this online and you thought that you would click it. Either way, I have been a pastor and in pastoral ministry for about 13 years, and this topic, even 13 years ago when I was a youth pastor, was a huge topic, and it's not going away, right? Because in our human nature, we're always going to wrestle with this. But our team felt like I might be the right person to navigate this particular conversation because I've spent an extensive amount of time exploring the topic and seeing what we can do to help other people who are battling it. I ended up writing a book a few years ago called I Care What You Think. It's on Amazon. I think it's like $2 or $3 on Kindle. So I'm going to get rich if you buy it. But the subtitle in the book is Reclaiming Your Self-Confidence in a World of Insecurity, Fear, and Anxiety. And I wrote that out of in response to the number of people that had been coming to me asking for prayer about the different fears in their lives, the different anxieties. And I just began to see trends that people that were religious, people that were non-religious, people that grew up in church, people that didn't grow up in church, young people, elderly people, everybody in between. We all have in common the battle of fear that we walk through every single day. Every single person struggles with insecurity every single day, and it affects every area of our lives. I really do believe, I really believe that God has a solution for it, and that's what this short book talks about. And I try not to be invasive and overly preachy or anything like that. What I want to do is just help people to realize that this topic isn't just a mental or an emotional topic, it's a spiritual topic too. So, like I said, I'm a pastor at Grace Church. I pastor the West Bridgewater location in Massachusetts, and this subject is one that seems to be the most frequent that comes up in our prayer requests. So we try our best to talk about it frequently. And one of the reasons we're doing this right now, this webinar right now, is because this Sunday, and I guess depending on when you're watching, it may not be this Sunday, but for the 4 Sundays in October, we are going to be looking at fear and anxiety, and we're doing a teaching series called Insomnia, What Keeps You Up at Night. And every October, we try to do a study on fear and anxiety. And so if you want further study, further resources, and more discussions and conversations like this, I strongly encourage you to hop on our website and watch along in that teaching series with us. You can watch it live on Sunday mornings at 9:30. You can come to one of our physical locations, or you can watch it on demand anytime after Saturday night on our YouTube channel. So let me just share some things, and we're just going to hop right in. Like I said, feel free to take notes. Feel free to use the chat thread. We'll try to make it as interactive as possible. But I also know it's a very vulnerable topic. It's a very sensitive materials that we're walking through. So I'm not asking you, hey, what are you most depressed about right now? I wouldn't do anything like that. So please know that this is not going to be anything like that. I just want to give you some good stuff to walk away with. So the first one, here's the current reality. And you may know this already, but the current reality is right now in coming on October of 2020. I think we're in the final day of September as of today. But coming on the fall of 2020, mental illness is at an all-time high, and the struggles with mental health have never been higher than they are right now. Let me just give you some stats that the CDC released actually about a month ago, and because it's actually trending in the wrong direction, these numbers might be lower than what today's reality is. 31% of adults in America are struggling with anxiety and depression symptoms. 31%. So 1 in 3 adults. 1 in 3 adults. And I would imagine that percentage is even higher for us that are part of this conversation, because we're wanting to seek out help, right? So that might be almost 100% for us. 31%. 26% of Americans are struggling with trauma or stress-related disorders. And in just a moment, I'm going to actually share the specific, like what do those mean? A lot of people, you may be struggling with one of these and you don't even realize it. So what I want to do is help you to understand what are some of the symptoms for these different conditions, and is that you? Because that'll help you know how to find help. 13% of Americans have either started or increased their substance usage since March, since the pandemic began. 13%. Now, percentages can be misleading, so I like to take that to real people. That's about 1 in every 7 people have started or increased substance users. 1 in every 7 adults in America, which means you and I all know somebody that's their journey right now. In fact, realistically, you and I all know somebody and we don't realize that that's them. The last one, and this one just breaks my heart, is 11% of Americans have seriously considered taking their own lives since March because of all of the isolation, because of the quarantines, because of the hardships, because of the stress. And our prayer is that nobody takes that step. In fact, that number is even higher for young adults. It's closer to 25% of young adults have actually considered suicide. So 1 in 4 adults, young adults, are thinking of taking that step right now. This is heavy. It has been a difficult year. We know that, and we're very sensitive to that. And what the CDC basically concluded was when you add all those numbers together and you look at the unique individuals, over 40% of the nation is mentally unhealthy right now. Over 40% of the nation, that more people are actually being affected by the mental effects of this pandemic than by the physical effects of this pandemic. So what we're hearing on the news, which is it's just as important, is all of the physical effects. Who's getting sick? Who's dying from this virus? What we're not hearing enough of is the mental effects, because statistically speaking, that is actually affecting more people. So if you're tuning in to watch this, it's probably because you're already there, or you have a loved one who's struggling, or both. So what I want to do is I just want to share some of the symptoms of these different categories and what we can do about it, and then some further resources at the very end. Okay? You guys still with me? Alrighty, let's dive into it. The first one, depression. Now here's the deal. I think a lot of people don't fully understand what depression is. And so there's a misdiagnosis in certain ways where people diagnose themselves as being depressed when they're really not. And then there's also, on the flip side, people who are walking through depression, don't even realize it. So what I want to do is just share some of the symptoms of depression. And here's what I would say. I think every single person in America is struggling with at least one of these right now. So to me, to know if this is really a struggle of depression for you, ask yourself if you're resonating with a multitude of these, majority of these. All right, looking for trends here. Okay, the first one is excessive worry, feeling restless or on edge, muscle tension, like physically your muscles are feeling tense, excessive guilt. Maybe you're walking around with guilt of things that you did or didn't do. You feel bad every time something goes wrong. It's your fault. Withdraw from close friendships and relationships. If you just want to isolate right now, you don't really want to be around people, even people that 6 months ago, 7 months ago, you wanted to be around. Now you just want to withdraw. Feeling meaningless, fatigue, changes in your appetite, and that can go either way. Maybe you don't have much of an appetite, or maybe you're overeating, or you're eating a bunch of junk because you're putting your emotions in that. Changes in your sleep patterns, quick to anger, trouble concentrating at work. For some of you, you may be struggling with a lot of these, and you hadn't pinned it to depression, but I mean, it might be there. It really might. And in just a moment, we're going to talk about, if that is you, what's something you can do to fight against that. Let me talk about stress-related trauma, because that's a little different, and there's obviously overlap in the symptoms, but they impact us differently. Stress-related trauma, some of the symptoms you'll see here, and like it said, the nation's about 1 in 4 adults that are walking with this. It's continued flashbacks and replaying of traumatic events. So maybe this was triggered by something that you just keep replaying in your mind, and you're saying, oh, I wish this had happened instead. I wish I'd done this instead. That's a sign of stress-related trauma, that you're actually dealing with trauma. Emotional numbness, avoidance of certain places or people or activities that serve as triggers and reminders of the trauma, difficulty sleeping and concentrating, feeling easily irritated and angered. Those are all examples of stress-related trauma. And my prayer actually is, as ironic as it sounds, is if you're struggling with depression or stress-related trauma, I hope you're able to identify it. I hope you don't struggle with those, but I do hope that if you are, you have the self-awareness to know you are. Because if you don't, then those things can really hurt you in a way that you're not dealing with. So the last one I want to talk about is the symptoms for burnout, because I think this is one that a lot of people have. The depression, the trauma, those may not resonate with you, but burnout might, because it's some different symptoms. The first one is you're exhausted all the time. You're turning cynical, especially towards things that you weren't before. Like now you're more critical of them. You feel useless, either overall or at work. You hate your job. You find everything gets under your skin. It's even things that didn't used to before. You're becoming frustrated and irritable towards people that didn't, for the same things that didn't frustrate you or irritate you before. Your mind is wandering at work. It's hard for you to focus. Frequent headaches. Here's one that people don't realize is actually triggered by burnout: is stomach and bowel movements. If you find that physically digestion is becoming an issue for you, that's actually something that may have been triggered by burnout, increased substance usage, and fatigue. So some of you right now are saying, holy cow, that's me. Or you have a loved one that you're thinking that's what it is. It's burnout, or it's trauma, and they don't realize it. And if that is you, if one of those is you or a loved one, I do encourage you beyond this webinar to do some further research and to see what you can do to find help even deeper. So what I just want to do is I really just want to kind of scratch the surface and ask ourselves what we can do about it. And let me just give you, I'm just going to give you two things that I think, regardless of your symptoms and regardless of if you kind of categorize yourself in one of those areas, or you have maybe some, but you wouldn't say you're depressed, wherever you're at in the journey, I think these two things can help anybody. And I'm going to jump into those in just a moment. I did want to give you a heads up that there are actually two sources I'm using as the anchors for this information that I'll share more about at the end, just in case you want to dive deeper, because this is, in my mind, the beginning of a conversation. And some of you watching right now, this is kind of the first resource that you've decided to dive into about this topic, even though it's something that you're walking with. You're having some heavy fears. There's deep anxiety. There's worry that is on your heart, and you're trying to figure out what to do. Know that there's a lot of stuff out there for this. We obviously know that, and some come from a faith-based perspective, some come from a psychological perspective. But whatever you believe, continue to find find help with those things. So I'm going to cover a lot in a short amount of time here, and so I do encourage you to take notes, even if it's just mental notes of I'm going to do this, because I think if we're struggling with this, we've got to do something different. We can't just expect this will work itself out over time. Like as this pandemic dies down and as things start to open up slowly over time, things will get. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to take initiative here. So at the core of a lot of these issues is isolation, that we feel like we're walking through this on our own. Do you feel that way? Like we feel like we're on an island. People don't really understand our feelings, or we're afraid to tell them our feelings. And so what happens is our insecurity, it stacks us against each other. It turns we into me. And that's what we don't want, because we are far more vulnerable when we're on our own. Do you find that to be the case? That insecurity is the ultimate divider. If Satan, who's our spiritual enemy, if he can emotionally separate you from the people who love you, you're far more vulnerable. So much of our pain comes in feeling like we have to deal with this on our own, right? Like I think it's amazing how the hardships and the boulders and the burdens and the barriers that you can overcome when you know there's someone there with you. What makes these things difficult is the feeling that it's just us and that we're out there and that nobody really understands what we're going through. I took a pastoral counseling class when I was in seminary, and it was a bit overwhelming because I didn't have any psychology background, and there was a bit of an assumption that, well, you all took psychology in college, and so you should know some of these terms, and I didn't, and so I felt a bit overwhelmed. But what I found at the heart of counseling is not giving good advice, which I thought it was. I thought it was, I go into a room, I lay down on a couch, I look up at the ceiling, and I share all my thoughts, and then the counselor tells me what to do next. But that's not the heart of counseling, and some of you know that already. That at the heart of counseling is empathetic listening. It's asking questions, not giving answers. Because less than answers, people need to feel understood. Some of you have experienced that with your spouse, right? Where sometimes you'll get home after an exhausted day or after a hard conversation, and you're not looking for advice. You just need to talk it out. You just need someone to listen to you. In fact, sometimes my wife, Katie, and I will even say, like as a preface to our conversation, we'll say, hey, I'm not looking for you to give me advice. I just need you to listen. Because that's ultimately, we just need someone to understand our pain in that moment. That's really, really important. So with that, I just want you to take a moment, and I want you to ask yourself, Who can you sit across from to share how you're feeling? And all you're doing is asking them to listen. So it doesn't need to be somebody. It doesn't need to be somebody that fully understands everything in your life. It doesn't need to be somebody that fully believes every single thing you believe. It doesn't need to be somebody that's in the same season of life and understands all of the stressors of your life. It doesn't. Sometimes we set the bar so high that we end up talking to no one about these things. Who's somebody that you trust that will listen? And they don't even have to give good advice. I honestly, what you need is someone that knows you. And I'm guessing that you have people in your life that can be that, but you may just need to reach out to them. You may just need to sit down with them, and all you're doing is asking them to listen. And here's the lies that you need to fight against that might stop you from doing it, because that sounds easy enough. And I think, by the way, women, I think, are much better at this than guys are. I think guys were like, I don't want to sit around and talk about my feelings, and that's why I think a lot of guys are struggling with depression and burnout and all the trauma-related disorders, but they don't really ever deal with it. They just kind of shove it in a suitcase. They sweep it under the rug. They don't ever want to talk about it. And as a result, like, those symptoms aren't going away, even if the diagnosis isn't there. And that's why I think there's a lot of anger and irritability, and a lot of people that hate their jobs, it's much deeper than that, and it's never dealt with. So here are the lies that you need to fight against that would stop you from actually finding somebody that you're going to sit across from and get coffee with next week and say, hey, I just need you to know how I'm feeling right now. These are the lies in your head of here's why you're not going to do that. Number one, I don't want to inconvenience or irritate them. And this is a big one. In fact, I'm thrown off by the number of people that reach out to me as a pastor for help or for prayer or for counsel. And there's almost always a preface of, hey, I know you're really busy. I don't mean to inconvenience you. I know you've got a lot going on. I'm so sorry for reaching out. I don't mean to take up your time. It's like our triggers are, we just feel bad for asking for help. And that's not at all how we should feel, because God designed you to be together, not separate. And God designed you to be a part of a team and a group, not to do this on your own. But culturally, we feel like we've got to figure it out. We've got to conquer it. We've got to be the champion of our own lives. We can't ask anybody for help. So what stops us is we don't want to inconvenience them. Another one is they don't really care. Really? They don't really care, right? Like, do you really care what's going on in my life? Because if you did, you would have already asked. Or this person hasn't reached out to me because they don't really care about me. So now I'm just the annoying friend that's reaching out to them. Like, we have all these, we're really good at coming up with lies about our friends, aren't we? So even the person you're thinking of right now that you could see sitting down and having that kind of conversation with, you might also, because of the insecurity that exists in your heart, you might also wonder if they would even want to, because they don't really care. They don't really love you as much as you think they do, right? Another question, or another lie maybe that we battle with, is they'll judge me, that this will change the way they view me. And like, if they really know how I'm feeling about this, it's going to change our friendship. It's going to change our relationship, because I'm kind of peeling back the curtain and they're seeing the real me. And the truth is this: you have to mute those lies. You have to have the courage to have someone you can sit across from and be honest with, because all you're doing is sharing what you're struggling with, how you're feeling, and you're asking for them to listen and to pray for you if you share the same faith. And that's it. And believe it or not, I mean, that sounds oversimple, but believe it or not, that's a really powerful first step that most people that are struggling with, they never take, because they just don't realize how important it is. But the truth is, loneliness actually pushes us away from the very thing we need the most in that exact moment: trusting relationships. And so sometimes the catch-22 in this is, we know what we need, but because of what we're struggling with, we're pushing back from the very thing we need. So if we are struggling with fear, whatever it is, I don't want to diagnose your fear, but the anxiety that's on your heart, what you need is someone to share it with, because the loneliness is the thing that's making that go deeper. But at the same time, that loneliness is the thing that's triggering your mind into thinking that nobody really cares about you. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when you start to treat your friends like they don't care about you, and they don't love you, and they don't value you, and they don't prioritize you. So as a result, you scale back, you talk to them less, you spend less time with them. And you know what happens over time? Is you don't become as high of a priority to them. They stop loving or caring for you as much as they did before, not because they want to, but because you're actually sending them signals that you're scaling back and that they shouldn't. That's just the defense mechanism that we have in all of us. See, it's hard to pursue someone that's walking away from you, right? Right? So find someone you can be honest with. That's the first thing. And the second one I would encourage is this. And by the way, I know this seems obvious. When we're overwhelmed, the solution isn't more work, more franticness. It's actually the opposite. It's slowing down. It's number two is just slow down and truly rest. Truly rest. And we're really bad at this. Do you realize that? Like, just let us know in the chat thread. Are you really bad at resting? Because I think our generation is just not good at it. Like, we're just really distracted. I think a lot of us are exhausted, and it's actually not because we don't have enough time off. It's because we aren't using our time off constructively. We fill it up doing things that are easy and lazy, but they don't necessarily help us to recover and to restore and to be refreshed for the next day. They just distract us. They just help us to kind of shut down completely. Do you guys know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's really easy because lives are so busy, right? We're all busy. How are you doing today? I'm busy. Like, we know that. When we get to the end of the week and we're so tired and we're so exhausted that rest just becomes doing nothing. But rest is not the absence of activity. Rest is the rhythm of restoration, so that we can keep running. I've run 2 half marathons in my life, and I've never been a runner. In fact, when I was in elementary school, they made us do the 1 mile run. Do you guys remember doing that? I didn't even know why they made us do. It's just like once a year. Hey, we just want to remind you, you're not as athletic as you want to be. Oh, and do chin-ups too, because you'll never do that the rest of your life. But for now, you're gonna prove to us that you can't do a chin-up again this year. So I would do the 1 mile run, and every year when I was in elementary school, I was the last one. Like I was the slowest person in my class, and so I've never been a huge runner. But a few years ago, and I think it was just the personal achievement thing, I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And it was overwhelming because a half marathon is 13 miles, and I couldn't even run one. And I talked to a friend who had run the Goofy, I think it's called the Goofy Marathon, which you actually run a half marathon through Disney World and then a full marathon through Disney World the next day, which isn't goofy. That's insanity. But I asked him, like, okay, what do you do to train for that? Do you just run a mile and the next day you run 2 miles? And he explained to me the run-walk method of marathon running that many people, millions use, where you run for a period of time and then you walk, and you start that in mile 1. You don't wait until you're tired. So you might do 5 minutes of running and then 1 minute of walking, and then 5 minutes of running and then 1 minute of walking. And you're breaking that up to conserve your energy for later on. So the weird thing is you've got all this adrenaline and excitement, and you start this race, and 6 minutes in, you're walking. And it feels unnatural because you know that, like, the energy and the, like, you've got all the stamina to keep going. But the reason that you slow down then is because you're creating a rhythm that you're allowing your body to catch its breath, and then you go for another 5. And then you catch your breath, and then you go for another 5. And that run-walk method, what that does is it conserves energy so that you don't get to mile 8 and you've run, and now you're exhausted and you have to walk the rest of it. But you can continue the rhythm because you have paced yourself. And that's what it means to really slow down and rest. It means that you are intentionally engaging in something that refreshes you so that you can be restored to keep running. So sometimes the mistake we make is we mix up pausing and resting. See, pausing is unplugging and doing nothing just to catch your breath. And there's room for that. Sometimes we get home from work and we just need to kind of do nothing for a little bit. We need to do something that's a little bit more brain dead, that doesn't really take any work, and that's fine to do. But pausing is not necessarily the thing that refreshes you. It's just the thing that takes no energy. Whereas resting is the conscious decision of doing activities that restore you. So for a lot of us, we just aren't good at resting because we spend all of our rest time pausing. I hope that you're tracking with me. In fact, if you are, I just want you to throw in the chat thread or write down, or if you're watching with someone, just turn to them and give an example of something you find you waste your time on. Like, what do you waste your rest time on? So on a day off, what are things you fill your time with that don't necessarily restore you or give you new life or refresh you, but you do them because they're easy? What's that for you? So I'm looking in the threads to see as people are putting them in there. All right. As you're doing that, so like video games might be one where you end up day off and you just play video games all day, and then you get to the next day and you're exhausted because you didn't really do anything that restored you. Maybe watching Netflix, that's a huge one, right? Or anything on TV. Social media is the ultimate. I don't know a single person on the planet that is refreshed and restored from looking at their social media newsfeed. But do we do it? Yes. Especially when we come home and we're brain dead and we're just scrolling through that newsfeed, for hours on end, and all it does is waste our time. So the reason why this is important is it's really easy to get to the end of a day off and still feel exhausted, right? Like if you get to the end of a day off and you're just as exhausted, like you go into the next week and you're exhausted and you're still feeling that burnout, you didn't truly rest. If you get to the end of a vacation and you're just as burdened and exhausted as you were when you left, you aren't using your time off well. And so you're going into another day and another week exhausted and burnt out, and more likely more vulnerable to the fears, to the anxieties, to the worries in your life. The truth is this: no one can rest for you. That's solely up to you. And some of you might just be hitting pause instead of resting. So ask yourself, what truly restores you? What strengthens you? What fills you up? What are the things that in your time off you need to do more of, because they don't just take less energy, but they actually refresh you at the same time? Those are two very different things. What are some of the things that this brings me new energy to get to the day? And that's different for everybody. So for some of you, you're maybe more of like an artist and you're creative, so playing music or listening to music or writing, journaling. And some of these things might actually take more energy, but still refresh you more. I know the athletes out there, you might love to go out and play a sport with a friend or go shoot hoops in the driveway. Maybe it's something as simple as reading or playing a board game with your spouse and your family instead of just sitting down and binge watching the same show on Netflix, but something that creates a connection, that creates that energy. Let me give you a free resource here before we wrap up, because this pertains right to it. I actually wrote a very short book that I'm willing to give you guys completely for free. It's called Pause, and it's on resting. And it's one you could probably read through in about an hour. So I didn't want it to be lengthy. I just wanted to help you to develop more of a rhythm of resting throughout your week and throughout your year, so that you never burn out. So tell you what, I'm going to give you the free URL. If you go to thatpausebook.com, you can download the digital copy of it for free. It'd go right to your Kindle or whatever digital reading device you have. But go to thatpausebook.com. Just download it. There's no strings attached to it. But that might help you too. And it might be something that you read through it and you're like, oh, I got this one thing out of it. That was still worth the hour of your time. It's also on Amazon if you prefer the paperback. But what I'm asking you to do is really be intentional about rest, because I think that burnout is probably more common than we think. And I think that really is the source of where a lot of our fears and anxieties come from. It's really easy for fears to overwhelm us, for anxiety to overwhelm us, for us to feel so much worry, because we're burnt out and we're vulnerable and we're on our own trying to do it. So slow down, step away, and catch your breath. Give yourself the gift of sabbatical so that you can refocus your mind. Because it's been a long, exhausting year, right? I mean, with all that's going on, you've persevered, you've made it through, but it's still hard. And I think some of us feel bad that we're not like thriving right now. I don't know if anybody's thriving. I think the people that are thriving are people that are either truly a very unique exception, or they're not truly paying attention to the hurt around them and the people that need their help. Because it's a hard year, and the year's not over. Like, we're still right in the middle of it. So if you're feeling burnout, that's expected, but you've got to slow down, because if you don't, the fears, the anxieties, the stressors, the discontentment, the anger, the isolation, it's all still going to be there. So kind of to wrap things up, the two things that I just encourage you to do is, one, find someone that you can have an honest, vulnerable conversation with. Find somebody that can truly understand you, that really knows what you're going through and is willing to help you, and help you by being the person that listens to you. Because sharing that burden with another person is very powerful, and that's often the thing we're missing. So that's the first thing. The second one is find a way to rest well each week. Find a way that when you come home from work or when you have your days off, that you're truly not just pausing and doing nothing, but you're resting as well. You're doing things that restore you, that refresh you, so that you can keep running the next week. A few next steps I'll give you guys if you're interested in more, if you want more, maybe this whet your appetite and you're still hungry for more. Like I mentioned, there are 2 books I've written on this. The first one is I Care What You Think, and the second one is Pause. And in fact, if you put it in the comments that you just want one of those books, and you're like, hey, I feel like Steven's just trying to plug his book right now, I don't care. We will give it to you for free. We have copies of it. In fact, the members of Grace Church get any of these resources for free each and every day, because we just have them available. So if you're interested, I think those are books that help that view it from a spiritual perspective too. If any of those things at the very beginning, you're like, I think I'm actually struggling with that and I hadn't thought about it, spend some time on Google looking it up. And here's the deal. Don't just read a blog that somebody wrote. Make sure it's a really good resource. I like WebMD for all mental health related responses. I think they've got some really good resources that are all trusted. They're all medical doctors, because anybody can write a blog. Farmer Dan can write a blog on mental health, and you don't know that it's a guy that doesn't know what he's talking about. So make sure it's a real resource. The second thing is, like I said, Grace Church, we are starting this teaching series in the month of October. For each weekend, we'll have the new part premiere online and in person. So if you go to that'sgrace.org, you can either RSVP for one of our in-person services, or you can get the information on watching it online with us from your couch, because we're going to be looking at these exact things over the next few weeks. What do we do when we feel like there's no guarantee in our future? What do we do when we feel burdened, when we feel overwhelmed, and when we feel discontent? And so I think these would be really good conversations. I'd love for you to be a part of it. Whether you call Grace Church your home or not, I really think this could be helpful and beneficial to you, and that's what we're trying to do, is just help you right now, because I believe this: a lack of faith will always cause higher levels of worry and stress, and anxiety. And so I believe that faith is the ultimate remedy, and so I just encourage you to tune in with us and see if maybe what is missing in your life goes far deeper than any type of conversation about mental and emotional health, and it's actually a spiritual matter that you need to resolve, and spend some time thinking about your relationship with God. So tune in this week. I think it could be really, really helpful to you. And if you have anything else that you have questions about, or you might need prayer, you might not know somebody that you feel comfortable being vulnerable with, feel free to reach out to our team, the Grace Church team. You can put it in the chat thread, or you can find us on Facebook or through our website. And just let us know if you need prayer, or if you'd like to sit down and meet with one of the pastors and just have them sit across from you and listen. We just want to be there for you. It's a hard year. We're trying to get through it together. We don't want you to feel like you're on an island, because you're not. So don't let Satan convince you you are. Satan's ultimate goal is to convince you that you're me instead of we, and it is we. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this was beneficial. If it was, feel free to share it along with somebody that might need it. And hopefully we will keep being able to interact with this through our teaching series. Thank you so much for watching.